Yesterday, during Trump's rant to Republicans at their retreat, he did more than just threaten to cancel U.S. elections. He also went into a very weird stream of consciousness where he touched on so many different unrelated issues that it was almost impossible to keep track. But the President of the United States did, in fact, prove, I think, my opinion, that he's definitely way worse mentally than I think most of us had previously thought. So I'm going to go through this list here of some of the weirdest things that Trump did during that speech yesterday. First one is he imitated the sounds that the auto pen makes, because God knows every American can't sleep at night thinking about how horrible the auto pen is, something that honestly a year ago most people didn't even know existed. But here is what Trump said about the auto pen while attacking President Biden, who of course is just a private citizen at this point. But here's what Trump said. And by the way, you ought to make a big deal out of the auto pen. The auto pen was your precedent, because most of the things were signed by auto pen and you're not allowed to do that. I signed very little. You got to sign it. You can't give it to an auto pen. And you can always tell an auto pen one thing, it has 2 tiny dots. You know that? 2 little dots. Do you know what that's from? 2 pins. They go bing, pow, bing, pow. They're wonderful things. This is dementia. This is an individual who learned something recently, and they're not able to recall things that they have known for many years. But they can recall, in some instances, depending on how advanced the disease is, they can recall things that they just learned if it stimulates them enough. This little fact that Trump learned about the 2 pins, he remembers it. And so he's telling this story like, hey, this got 2 pins. Did you know that? I didn't know there 2 little pins. Just bing, bing, bang, pow, ping, poo, pa, choo, pa. And that's the story he tells. And he's telling these members of Congress that are terrified of getting their asses kicked in the midterm. He's like, y'all gotta make a big deal about the auto pen. Nobody in the United States of America, regardless of political affiliation, I can promise you not one single person is going to go to the polls in November and say, well, my biggest issue is the auto pen. I know I can't afford my medications and I haven't eaten in 3 weeks because food is astronomical and I lost my job 2 years ago, but the auto pen is my biggest concern. That's not gonna happen. But this demented geezer is literally telling these Republicans, you got to make it all about the auto pen. Please do. Please do. I want this entire campaign for Republicans. I want y'all to run every ad talking about that auto pen, and let's see how that plays out for you in November. I wish that were the end of it. I really genuinely wish I didn't have more crazy, stupid things that Trump said, but I do. He also did an impression of his wife, the First Lady of the United States. He went on a tangent, even worse than the auto pen, where he started talking about his dancing, right? He said his wife, who is a very classy lady, hates it. Here's what Trump said. She's a very classy person, right? She said it's so unpresidential. She hates when I dance. I said, everybody wants me to dance. Darling, it's not presidential, she actually said. Could you imagine FDR dancing? I think for obvious reasons, most of us cannot obviously imagine FDR dancing, you dumbass. I'm also going to have to take issue with the fact that Donald Trump called his wife a very classy person. I think what he meant was very trashy person. There is nothing classy about Melania Trump. She has a lot of money, sure, because she married money. But money is not class. Money is money. Money is, I can buy things that other people can't, sure. But that in no way makes you better than anybody else, and it sure as hell doesn't make you classier than anybody else. But she is right about his dancing is stupid and unpresidential. But it is what it is. It's one of the only things he has that I think endears him to some people. So he's going to keep doing it until, of course, he does one of these. And, then we never have to see him dancing again. And then, there's always an and then. Then he goes on about one of the reporters in the room, a man by the name of Doug Mills from the New York Times. He actually won the Pulitzer Prize last year for he's the one who got the photograph of Butler, Pennsylvania, when the bullet came near Trump's ear. So Trump sees him out there in the crowd, and he says this: Pulitzer Prize, Pulitzer Prize. He got one for the bullet. He had the bullet, but he got how many Pulitzer Prizes? 3 Pulitzer Prizes. Make me look thin for a change, Doug. You are making me look a little heavy. I'm not happy about it. Yeah, it's Doug's fault you're fat. Doug is the one making us think that you're heavier than you are, Donald. You nailed it. That's what it is. Because he's actually a super thin guy. But Doug, Pulitzer Prize winner Doug, is out there taking such bad photos that now we think he's fat. I think you're blaming Doug for things that Doug has no control over, Donald. I would assume it's your nonstop diet of fast food multiple times a day. And then, this is the last one. I could go on, but I'm only going to do one more. He talked about how good looking the troops were in the room. Bunch of men standing in the back there in uniform, and man, he could barely contain himself. Trump said this: You're living in one of the safest cities in the country. It's a great thing. You can walk to the restaurants. Restaurants were all booming. New restaurants, they were all closing. You wouldn't have had a restaurant. And okay, you know what? I'm going to stop right there because that's just a weird, nonsensical statement that, of course, has no basis in reality. The businesses were not closing. They actually started to have to close their doors once the National Guard came in and started occupying D.C. because nobody wanted to go out anymore because it was a police state. So that's what happened there. But he continues, says, and I don't know about you, but to me, those soldiers standing there look so good. To each their own, buddy. I'm not here to judge you for that, but you're always kind of talking about how good looking all these other guys are while, restricting the rights of the LGBTQ community because you guys say that they're forcing their lifestyle upon you. So I'm just going to say I find that a little bit hypocritical for him to keep doing that.